if I look down, forgive me. I've written quite a few notes, and when you're talking to a camera, it's not always easy to ad lib. So from time to time, you will see me looking down to get some kind of guidance and some kind of coherency in what I'm saying. Of course, there's plenty of time for questions. I'll try answer as many as I can. I've already got quite a few questions in, and they're all around the same thing. But just to go, just to get started, I felt that there was a need to come back after giving our first presentation 3 weeks ago. So much has happened, and we've got so much ahead of us. But anyway, I think what was interesting is overnight we got Netflix results. I mean, they were absolutely staggering. They added another 15.8 million paid subscribers globally. That's in the first quarter. Last year at this time, they added about 9.6 million, which was considered a very, very large amount. And it was way above this 15.8 is way above where Netflix wanted to be or thought they would be. I think they were looking for 8.25 million subscribers. So it's a staggering number. And what I want to point out it just highlights the value that tech has brought us in this lockdown. As the Netflix executive said, they wanted to make lockdown bearable for us. Just on lockdown, we didn't order this. This lockdown, this close of the global economy has been thrust upon us without choice. It's damaging our businesses, it's damaging our income, it's keeping us apart from friends, it's keeping us apart from family, but worst of all, it's forcing us to endure meal after meal of home cooking. Jay Powell, when releasing his 2.3 billion stimulus package 2 weeks ago, sympathized with the public. He said that, in giving his content and giving the context behind his package, he said that he was addressing the fact that businesses had no money and that the unemployed were lining up for benefits. And he said, it's not their fault. It wasn't their fault. It's no one's fault that we're in this position. So who is to blame for it, and why are we in this kind of position now where we have a lockdown and being forced to stay at home? Well, I'm going to address that a little later. I'll cover that in a few minutes. Things are not easy. We know that. I've lived through many crises in my life before, and as I've said, each one has its own characteristics. In the past, many of them have actually had an element of predictability about them. They've had excesses in the financial system that have resulted in governments actually taking action that has slowed down the economy. But we've never seen anything like this. We've never seen a crisis in which we have seen the whole world closed down. But there's another element. It's not only the virus that has caused this, or COVID-19 or the coronavirus, etc. There's another element that is added to this discomfort, and that was the unnecessary spat between Russia and the Saudis on oil. This race to the bottom, this need to send prices down, or to have a price war at a time where we knew demand was already under pressure. And the fact that they introduced this or undertook this kind of price war, all that did was cause additional drama in financial markets, which we have not quite overcome at the moment. And even though we've seen this agreement to cut production, it's not sufficient, etc., we're still having enormous pressures and problems in the oil market. The damage was done. That price war brought more damage on us that we now have to undo. And as we talk at the moment, Brent oil, which is the price in which we make our petrol is based, etc., and which most of the world other than America uses, is at a 21-year low. Um, I just see WTI, which is the American oil price, trading, I think, at $10 a barrel or thereabouts as well. Brent, $16 a barrel, etc. Um, so, how do we explain the market we're in? We've got the coronavirus, we've got the oil price, etc. How do we explain what we're in? I don't know. I don't. I really don't know how to classify it. It's no use going back and trying to overlay 1929 markets or 1987 markets, etc. Human behavior is unpredictable, and therefore it makes it very, very difficult to work out what comes next. So what do? And how do we as professionals? We just watch it literally day by day. We watch it day by day, and of course, we recalibrate our strategies based on that. But before I say that, from my own particular investment style and the chaps who work for me, we've got a 5-year outlook at least. When we choose companies that we believe are at the forefront of innovation. They're innovative companies, growth companies. We say, where's the money? Where's it being spent? That's where we want to be. So we've got a particular style of choosing businesses, which I'm going to discuss here. We look for a portfolio. We buy 15 to 25 companies, 4% each, etc. We're not worried about geography. Geography doesn't bother us. We don't buy countries, we buy businesses, and that's where we are. And by looking 5 years ahead, we still see a lot of opportunity in this market, and particularly at the moment, a lot is happening that is going to change that trajectory. Much of it was already taking place before the virus hit us as well. So all that's done has actually accelerated these issues. But I think let's just start by getting things into perspective. We're going to get over this. This is not going to last forever. Life's going to return to normal somewhere down the line. We're not going to enter a world where we walk around in masks all the time, or we eat alone in restaurants in a private booth served by a robot, or we holiday in some remote location away from everybody, not wanting to be with crowds. That's not going to happen. It's not part of our character. To distance ourselves from communities and that. Just ask kids about the lockdown. As much as they hate school, they are missing school. They miss their friends. They miss chatting to their friends during class. They miss the breaks. They miss kicking a ball in the playground with their friends, talking about records, talking about music, clothes, movies, whatever. And also, of course, just hanging out with them on the weekend. They're unhappy, and of course it's telling on their parents. That's why we get so many scream videos and that. So we're still going to go out, we are still going to travel, and we're still going to attract events and that. I think what's going to happen is that we're just going to be a little more aware of health issues where people pack into tight places. Just one other thing, we're going to come out of this crisis. Sorry, I just got distracted by a phone ringing in the background. Another thing, we're going to come out of this crisis a lot more technically competent. What I do want to say as well on the health issue, just think back about HIV, or even before that, which shows my age, herpes, or other transmitted diseases and that. We actually created an awareness campaign which addressed these issues. Even today, we still have relationships, but of course, people are a lot more aware of the health side of that relationship and how they act. And I think one will do the same with this, with COVID-19 and with the way that we respond with each other. HIV today is as far as social integration is concerned, is successful, and it hasn't altered the way that we actually live. Another thing as well, which is amusing as well, is that as fast as we're embracing the position that we're in, modest living, goodwill, charity, and so on, as soon as life returns to normal, believe me, so fast will we unlearn these lessons. That's the way we're wired. We're just think about New Year's Eve. what we say on New Year's Eve. We're going to go to gym every day of our lives. We're going to phone our parents. We're going to look after our family. We're going to read books. We're going to study. And that lasts for all of a week. We have this at the beginning of the year, we're very gung-ho and full of optimism and so on. And I think that I'll only be too happy if we return to the kind of life that we were in. So let's recap where we are. When we spoke a couple of weeks ago, we were probably in the depths of the market decline. If we go back to the beginning of the year on US markets, we're down about 12 or 13% as we are at the moment. That's it. From the beginning of the year, down about 12.5, 13%. From the high that we saw, and this is US markets in February the 19th, we're down about 16%. Sorry, I don't want to confuse you with numbers, just to give you the trend. We hit a bottom on the 23rd of March, and from that bottom, we're actually up 27%. So we bounced 27% from the bottom. From high to low, though, we were down about 34%. So we're somewhere in the middle. We fell dramatically, and we've recovered quite a bit. If you look at the JSE, it's a similar kind of pattern, that at one stage, I think from high to low, we were down about 36%. But we bounced from that bottom, we bounced up about 29%. So we find ourselves somewhere in the middle, not knowing, well, what's the next move? And that's what's going to be difficult to forecast. Where do we go to after this? Hopefully, the news that starts to come out drives us back into the market. I think it's going to take a little longer to get there. But on the other hand, I think those people who wanted to sell are probably already out. We can't forecast that, but whoever wanted to get out is probably out. On the other hand, what's going to drive the upside? I think there we need good news, and we need results to come through to drive us up. So we're probably going to hover around no man's land, but the news can change fast. Good news can come pretty fast. We're already seeing it in Europe. We're already seeing infection rates coming down. We're already seeing some of those economies picked up. It depends on how people respond, how the consumers respond, that will get us going upwards again. What's also fascinating is if we look at those stocks that have beaten this offside trap, some of the stocks that have actually done incredibly well, and it's obvious, that have done incredibly well since the beginning of the year, despite what we've gone through, despite the sharp fall that we've seen. In the US, of course, number one, Zoom video communication up close to 120% since the beginning of the year. Tesla, for reasons that I have absolutely no idea why, up 78%. We're going to ignore that one. And then we get Netflix, 35% up since the beginning of the year. Of course, entertainment, Amazon up 30%, e-commerce, Gilead Sciences, which is biotech, up 25%, advanced micro devices up about 24%. I haven't taken in last night, but I think we're going to get a pickup today. Semiconductors, NVIDIA semiconductors, 22%, and so we go. Abbott Laboratories, Activision, Blizzard, Microsoft, Kroger, Walmart, all of these companies are showing incredibly positive results despite where we are in the markets. There's a whole list of companies that have outperformed. If we go to Europe as well, we've seen pharmaceutical companies do well. Novo Nordisk, which is a Scandinavian company mainly associated with diabetes. AstraZeneca, Roche came out with their numbers today. Very, very good numbers. Company still very positive, even though they're not directly involved in vaccines. Reckitt and Benckiser, the mystery. Reckitt and Benckiser, we know it for making Dettol, but it's making, Reckitt and Benckiser makes a lot of sanitized products and that household products as well. And that's also outperformed. And of course, Nestle, providing food. We know Nestle very well. On the JSE, the winners, and they've been winners, Prosus, 28% up, Naspers, 22%, and British American Tobacco, the surprise, up around about 14%. And of course, we've had gold shares as well as gold heads towards $1,700. So $1,700. So there have been winners. That's the upside. On the downside, of course, we've had oil businesses under severe pressure as the oil prices collapsed. Apache, Schlumberger, Mohawk, Exxon, all of those down in well over 40 to 50%. The airlines naturally beaten up. Delta down 59%, Boeing down 55%. Of course, we know the problems that are going to beset it. And then the banks. Banks have come under a lot of pressure. Banks down, Wells Fargo down 48%, Citigroup down about 44%. And I can understand that. Banks have always been the mainstay. They're in good position. Don't underestimate how strong banks are, particularly in the US. They're well capitalized. They're still doing pretty well. But why would you want to own a bank? And we've taken a view, recently to get out of banks simply because in an environment where interest rates are zero, you have no margin to make money. Banks make money by lending out money. And if there's no demand, or if the demand, if you're paying 1 or 2% on deposit, if you're paying zero on deposit and lending out at 0.5% or 1%, whatever you do lend out, there's very little leeway to make money. I know that banks make money in other areas, transaction costs and trading and so on. But when you look through banks, I think it's a very difficult time for them. And of course, the chance of impairment is, the chance of impairment are going to increase, and the chances of bad debt. So, from our point of view, we're just avoiding financials for the meantime, not forever, but certainly under these kind of circumstances. So, there are 3 distinct markets we're watching at the moment. There could be 4, but I'm going to just choose 3. The one is health and tech, and I'm going to come on to that, which is leading the way. That's the one that we find very attractive. The second one is the oil market, and don't underestimate what the impact of oil is on the economy. In the US, I think the oil contributes about 8% to GDP and employs something like 10 million people. So where you get the oil price coming down, there's a whole ecosystem around the oil price and around the production of oil, which impacts on those businesses as well. So, and of course, a lot of banks are exposed to debt. It's not an enormous amount, but a lot of the oil companies that have taken out debt are vulnerable. One's got to do your work into this kind of area, but that does impact on banks who are exposed to this in a way. So the oil price is very important. I have a view on that. I've lived through the De Beers era. De Beers was a cartel that tried to control the price of diamonds until the Russians came in, until the Africans came in, and Sierra Leone and so on, and those diamonds started to unsettle the market. And today they haven't quite got the impact that they used to have. They can't quite control it. And in all fairness, OPEC was a cartel. And there's a glut of oil in the world today. The one thing we're not short of, and this could spell the end, of OPEC and the power of OPEC. And for once, we might get a real value of oil. What it means to the global economy, it's not for me to say. And I think the third market that we're watching is China. And why we're watching China is to see how consumers behave as they come out of lockdown. So far, the results have been pretty good. First place, LVMH, they're off to buy bags, and those expensive bags. I love it that they're doing that. L'Oreal doing pretty well as well, and these are anecdotal evidence coming from the companies themselves. So, so far okay. It's going to take time before they get confidence to go to in big numbers to go to restaurants and that. But we're monitoring it. I've got no strong views on it at the moment, but we watch that carefully. So, this revenge spending, I think, is a big theme as well. Revenge spending, meaning that after lockup you just feel that you owe yourself something, and that's not a face mask or anything like that. You want to go and buy something that you really want, that's colorful and is going to help you for whatever reason. Just given the limited time that we have got, I just want to focus on the health side as well. It's 100 years odd since the Spanish flu World War II ended in 1945. That's 75 years ago, and so on, in which a lot of destruction caused, and there were health issues there, etc. But I think if we go back and if we look at the period in between as well, we haven't quite had an issue like that. But I think, despite that, what has staggered me is just when this crisis came, just how disjointed and uncoordinated governments have been. In the past, where we've had a crisis, America has always stepped in. In 08, 09, it was America who took the lead and coordinated some kind of response from governments, from the rich governments. America has always been there, propping up the institutions, whether it's been Bretton Woods, the IMF, World Bank, and so on. It's been behind these institutions. In this instance, America was just absent. I think it was France trying to put the G7 together, have some kind of coordinated effort. The Saudis tried, I think, last week with the G20 or 2 weeks ago with the G20 in order to get an agreement out on oil, which they did do, etc. But I think what has happened over the last few years is that because of this breakup in relationships around the world, which one has to kind of see leaning towards America, and that there have been a lot of underfunded institutions, World Health Organization, America's attitude towards climate change. We know their attitude towards NATO and places like this. And a lot of those institutions have become weaker. And yet, when something like this happens, who do we blame? Who does Trump blame? But he blames the World Health Organization for not taking or not warning of the size of this pandemic. But we've underfunded those organizations. So what we found is that as a result of that, we've been caught completely off guard. Governments have been completely unprepared for this pandemic. No government has been, we can't identify any government that has been in a position where they've overcome this and have been on top of it. It's just been bumbling from one step to another. If you look at the US, they were very late to recognize the danger. Trump's still bumbling through. He wants to unlock. Other governors do not want to unlock. Certain governors of states do not feel it's right. They want further testing. They haven't got the equipment and so on. If you look at the EU, Italy was in trouble. What happened? As soon as Italy got into trouble, what did the EU do? They hardened their borders. They locked down, not letting anybody travel across. This is the EU. This is that's a whole strength or basis of the EU. When Italy needed help, both Germany and Holland turned their backs on them, not prepared to fund them. They didn't want to have the financial burden of helping out Italy. Who came to Italy's assistance? It was the Russians and the Chinese with masks and medical health care and equipment. So you've got a Europe now that is looking pretty vulnerable as well. I'm not going to go into that in any further detail, but all trying to identify that no country has come out on top. Even Britain, a lot of questions about just about how the government has handled this as well. So China, no one trusts China. Russia, who knows what their aims are, their long-term aims are. So I think the only countries that did do reasonably well were probably Singapore, Taiwan, and South Korea. But where I'm getting at is that this is not going to happen again. I don't think after this, any government or any country, voters, want to be caught in the same kind of situation. So why we bring it up? Because we see massive, massive increase in spending going to happen on public health care. We're also going to ensure, or countries are going to ensure, that everybody has coverage. And I think the one problem, I brought this up 3 weeks ago, is that you don't want the poor people or people who haven't got coverage, you don't want them getting sick and going to work, scared to go to a doctor, scared to miss a day's work and that. So I think there's going to be a lot more focus on universal health care and making sure that everybody can go to a doctor when they need to do that. The other thing, so we see public health care, massive spend. And if you listen to Philips results, Philips came out with their numbers earlier this week. If you listen to the CEO of Philips, he identified what's going to happen and how from now on there's going to be a massive increase in the in purchasing of IC units, of all the equipment that goes into there. Of course, they make precision diagnostic equipment and so on, and they see a booming market for their equipment. The other thing is pharmaceutical companies as well. There's been, as I mentioned 3 weeks ago as well, there's been a lot of pressure on pharmaceutical companies to cut down the price of drugs. But when you do that, you take money away from research and development. And of course, the pharmaceutical companies only focus on popular diseases, lung cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, and so on, heart disease, etc., away from other diseases. We need a vaccine. We need a vaccine. You can't do that without scientists. You can't do that with properly equipped people. And I think this is going to be another area. So for the meantime, you're going to see a lot of pressure off those pharmaceutical companies, big pharma, enabling them to look for cures and to continue the research and development, which we've highlighted a lack of now, and will be needed in the future. So from that, we find companies, we find this a very interesting area to go into. We've been there before, we've been along this path before, but there are companies like Philips, J&J, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, Intuitive Surgical, Stryker that stand out. Pharmaceutical companies like Roche, Novartis, AstraZeneca, Sanofi, Novo Nordisk, etc. But there's a wide choice. One's got to do your own homework into where these companies and which companies you like. But I think there's going to be a dominant factor in this particular in this particular area. The other thing is hygiene in the workplace. This is also going to be increased. I can't find a business. I know that Bidvesta's got Steiner, Steiner, who come around every now and again, and they replace the toilet rolls, and then they replace the soap in our toilets, etc. But I think there's going to be a lot more awareness of public places like that. Strangely, the companies that are benefiting at the moment are Reckitt and Benckiser, which I mentioned, are Dettol, Unilever, P&G, all of these businesses with sanitation and with household products that are being brought in the moment to clean your kitchen and to clean other places. But this is going to extend. It's going to extend to airports, to airplanes, to buses, to all kinds of places where people gather, sporting events and so on. I think there's going to be a lot more awareness and a lot more cleanliness around the kind of toilets that are there, or kitchens or public washing places, etc. So we see public, this also as being a big area. Although, to be honest, I can't find a particular company that stands out for me. And of course, this will cover protective masks, clothing, etc. in the in factories as well. That brings us on to technology, and I think, if there is one thing that we have learned, and that's to embrace technology as well. These shifts, the shifts that we're seeing, were already in place long before the pandemic took charge of us. All that's happened now is that it's been accelerated as well. We've discussed it, and I think even in the seminar that we had, the webcast that we had on Monday, we discussed it. But of course, being locked down, we've been forced to use e-commerce companies. That's great. Suddenly people who would never think of using them are now starting to use e-commerce businesses. It's enabled us not only to go down to the shop down the road, but we can actually shop across borders, which has just opened up a whole new world of commerce and a whole new world of goods for us. We can shop for anything. So e-commerce is a massive gainer out of this lockdown. Online payments, the cloud. Of course, when you're at home, and you're storing all the data. Where does it go? It goes into the cloud. And there are a number of businesses that are making big business out of that, from Microsoft to Amazon to Adobe to IBM and so on, who are storing data. And of course, there are the companies there that look after the software once the data is in there, that makes it very attractive. And of course, with webcasting here, I'm just looking, I don't know how many people we've got here, but 760 odd people on here. The fact that we're able to broadcast to them or to contact them, you need fast transmission. You can't have buffering. So you need fast transmission of data. And as we progress with all these different with the different software and different applications, so we need the fast transmission. Of course, that's where 5G is going to come in, and sooner, I think somewhere down the line, Apple will be releasing their first 5G phone, which makes every other phone that you've had defunct. So you've got to have to buy. You want to be up with it. You want to be in fashion, you've got to go buy a 5G phone. Of course, webcasts like the one we're having here, what's wonderful about that is that we're able to, I think on average, we have about, 50 people to our seminars. Suddenly we can reach something like 760. So for us, that's why we're packing in. We don't want, no, I'm kidding. I'd say when the pandemic ends, that's it. That's our audiences will go down to maybe for a webcast, which we're going to have at 7 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock, and it's probably going to have 50 or 60 people there, etc. So we're making hay while the sun's shining as well. The other interesting part of it is government's going to do this as well. I think government, just as conscious of crowds gathering, packing people into their departments and so on, or their buildings, etc., when they can do this online. So watch governments or global governments start to embrace this, if they're not doing that already, for passports, for visas, for licenses, even for law courts. Even sorting out legal problems, you will be able to do in the same way that we're doing here as well. Probably not as dramatic. You're not going to make a movie of a webcast of a court case, etc. It just doesn't have the same kind of feel. But I think there are practicalities behind it. I think we will be able to have it. And of course, you can get the best lawyers from overseas. Gaming, entertainment, I've already discussed Netflix, the biggest winners of all of them. I think people getting bored of Netflix, running out of movies, are now shifting to gaming, which you can download online. Companies like Nintendo are absolute winners at the moment, Tencent, Alibaba, and so on. The other one, homeschooling as well. Kids want to go to school. And I think you're going to do your kids a disservice by taking over schooling. But I think what we have learned is that we can enhance schooling. And for those people who want to learn, who want to have access to experts, you can do this. You will be able to access experts overseas, etc., global specialists and so on. So I think there's going to be a huge benefit that we've learned. We're not scared to use it anymore. So, in the list, Alphabet, Amazon, Facebook, these are the companies we're looking at. Apple, we go for the big ones. I'm not going for anything obscure. And remember, these businesses have huge amount of cash on their balance sheet and are in a favorable position, not only to increase R&D, research and development, but also to buy out any companies that are under pressure at the moment, need funding and so on. Visa, MasterCard as payment systems. Yes, we know that, of course, without shopping, nobody's swiping anymore. But still, I think on e-commerce and that, people still use their payment systems as well. And as soon as lockdowns and soon as people get back to shopping, we'll probably see a pickup with them as well. Where it comes to cloud and where it comes to using the data and software, you've got companies like Salesforce, Accenture, my favorite company, ASML, which is, with all of this comes the need for semiconductors, for the equipment that drives all these applications that we're talking about, ASML, and so on. So there are a number of businesses that I think are going to prosper quite significantly from this. I'm coming to the end, not a lot to go through. I think the other development that was on its way, which is going to be speeded up, is office automation as well. I think we saw this before. By automating the office, you save power, lower output costs, improve quality, of course, because it's a machine doing this. It reduces human working hours, and therefore, of course, the less humans, the more healthy the environment is. And also, of course, no interruptions at a time like this during lockdown. So we're going to see that development going. It was going on before. And this is nothing new, this automation, but there's a lot of talk at the moment about de-globalization or the end of globalization. Well, that was also happening long before this. These long supply chains, etc. Once we started to get the development or the invention of 3D printing, so people were starting to make parts in their backyard or bring the supply chain closer. They didn't have to find an expert. They didn't have to find anybody to make these precision parts. They could actually print them in their own backyard or in the back of the factory. So I think even before this happened, we started to see those supply chains shorten. And I think the one thing that we learned, particularly with exposure to China, is once China locked down, how those supply chains were disrupted. That's not going to happen. And I think what's going to happen is this localization, or reshoring, is going to continue to speed up. But no country or no region can actually survive on its own. There is going to be some form of globalization. It's almost impossible for factories to continue without some kind of help or parts from somewhere else. But I think what we are trying to get at is the globalization that we knew years ago, 20, 30 years ago, which also grew with the fall of communism in the late 90s. I think that's going to start to shrink. And there are a lot of businesses that are going to benefit from automation, from companies like Siemens, Dassault, I'm trying to think, SAP, Honeywell. All of those are very well placed. Accenture, Salesforce, and so on. Second last topic, travel and leisure. Probably going to survive. It's going to take longer. Companies under a lot of pressure as well. Tourism under a lot of pressure as well. I don't think that when we do start to lock down, people are going to get on a plane as well. I think you can't come out of a sick bed and expect to run a marathon. So I think slowly, as we get confidence, we'll ease into those, spending habits will turn, and that will include traveling. There's a natural curiosity about us. We want to go to other countries. We want to see how other people live. We want to enjoy their restaurants. We want to enjoy their cultures and that. So I think, as we've seen in the past, there's a period of where these companies are under pressure. I think from that point of view, if you want to take a punt, companies like some of the luxury good companies, I think, are looking quite attractive at the moment. And even Airbus, if one looks at Airbus, I mean, it's at a dirt cheap price at the moment as well. It's going to take them a year or two to recover before they get production up. But believe me, demand for aircraft will continue. And of course, it's not only aircraft. It's today modern aircraft are a lot more efficient than they used to be in the past. I'm going to end off now just on a. Just one of the last developments is that, what lockdown has shown us is that there's been an increased or a noticeable drop in carbon emissions. They're calling it spring cleaning. With spring comes much cleaner air, of course, with less traveling, with less aircraft traveling. I mean, the air has got a lot cleaner. Oil prices have collapsed to near bottoms. So that makes it very easy and very cheap for aircraft, etc. And as fossil fuels are very, very cheap at the moment, and therefore there is the threat that there'll be the shift away from renewables back to fossil fuels, etc. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the public, or certainly the young people today, are going to allow that. So I think don't be too sure that this is going to happen. I think that despite the fact that you have very cheap oil as well, I think the movement towards these environment, social responsibility, and of course governance, I think are going to continue. In that respect, we still stick by our choice, which is a Florida utility called Next Era. I'm going to leave it there. I've gone through, I spoke a long time, longer than I thought I would. There are lots of questions on the side there as well. I can address, we've had a few questions. I'm going to let Errol just come in here and say something, and then I can answer some of the questions as well. There are a few things that I've already got. Errol.
Yes, thank you very much, David. So David, while you've been speaking, I've been trying to collate some of these questions, and I've grouped them together. So I think, let me go through them maybe within those groups. We've got some around sort of recoveries and where we are, quite a few questions around timing, and then a few sort of company specific questions. So if that's okay with you, I'll sort of go through them in that order. So some of the questions were around whether or not you were surprised by how rapidly we've recovered from the levels that we have. And a related question asking, well, with this big rebound in markets, how confident are you that this is not just a classic bear rally?
I was surprised by the speed at which markets recovered, and that leaves you slightly uncomfortable, because you would rather that a stronger base is developed before. In other words, you want a strong base to develop that launches the recovery, which is really on the back of good news and better news. So as I said earlier on in the conversation, in the discussion, and that we're in no man's land now. What I do find, and Errol, there's one thing that's interesting, and I have a lot of fights about this, and a lot of jibes. There are a lot of bears out there. In fact, I think there are more bears than bulls by a long margin. So who are bears? Bears want the market to go down. Effectively, they see markets still retreating. In fact, they want a little bit of bad news because they position themselves for it. The lower the market goes, of course, the more they make money. So the thing is that when I confront them, and when they give me these bearish comments, I say, so are you short of the market? Have you sold? Are you going to increase it? Very many of them are reluctant. So I think those who are short of the market, excuse me, are short already. If you look at the number of bulls, there are very few bulls. If you look at if you look at asset managers, they're full of cash. They're not buying. If you look at hedge funds, they're very bearish. They're not buying. In other words, so against all that background, well, who's selling? So I think that gives you the underpin. That's a very good sign. It gives you an underpin on the market to say, okay, we're not going to go too much lower from here. We'll go lower, as we saw last night with the sell-off in oil prices. The problem is the upside. There we need good news, and we need unlocking. We need to see people back on the street. We need to have evidence that restaurants are opening, that businesses are opening, and that's going to take some time. So we're in a kind of indifferent period where probably the best solution is if you haven't been in the market, start nibbling. But if you are in the market, just to perhaps sit tight.
Thanks, David. It actually leads in quite well to sort of the next set of questions. We've really had a lot of questions around timing, and I think, David, we've been fairly consistent in terms of our message throughout this lockdown to remain invested. But there are quite a few questions around potentially averaging down at these levels. Should you be remaining in cash? Some questions around the exchange rate and taking money offshore. So quite a lot of timing issues here. I know you have addressed some of this, but maybe just spend a little bit more time on that specifically.
Look, if I had no exposure to the market, I would get exposure to the market, and I've tried to cover the areas that I go to. Don't be clever. You don't have to be clever. Selecting a good company, you don't have to be all that smart. You can be average like all of us at that. It doesn't take a great sense of intelligence to buy a good company. We already know the good companies. We use them all the time. We use Apple, we use Amazon, we use Netflix, we use Disney, we use all these businesses as well. And we know the value that they give to us. So, and on the healthcare side, we know the businesses as well, which I've tried to mention. So I'm quite happy to start nibbling at those kind of companies and start to increase them as we go along. If we're invested, if we've got quite a lot of investment, in other words, 50% plus, then I'd probably sit on a bit of cash and wait for further opportunities as well. But I try to introduce the fact that, we look ahead. I try to look 5 years ahead, and I want to say, is Amazon still going to be there 5 years? Are Philips still going to be there? Are these businesses still going to be there? Are still going to be prospering? If so, yes. What difference does it make when you get in? It's only your own bookkeeping. We hate to make losses and that, but no one's looking at your bookkeeping. No one cares about your own bookkeeping as well. It's only in your own head. So I'm not averse to doing that. Rand, that's always a difficult question. And here's the dilemma. This is the dilemma. Because when will the Rand improve? Only when the global economy improves. So when that market starts to take off, when the S&P starts to recover and go higher and higher, the Rand will come lower and lower. So you're missing out. It's that balancing act. I take the chicken's way out. I take you do it in little drabs. Do a bit, wait. Do a bit, wait. But do it. You're never going to make money doing nothing, just sitting on the sideline. No, you're going to just become one of the members of the great unrich.
Thanks, David. I'm going to move on to a few company-specific questions, David. I mean, I know you don't necessarily cover all of these, but one of the questions came specifically on Zoom. Obviously, been a lot of volatility in that stock, but then comments around the understanding that there will be a cultural change, but will this be short-lived? And are these sorts of share prices overdone?
I think Zoom's expensive. It's great. They've got their own problems with privacy. But I think that when I looked at it, they were up 178% in 3 months. That looks a little excessive. Even, funny enough, even Netflix, you have to understand the mind of investors. I think Netflix, after the results came out in post-market, I think they went up 7, 8, 9, 10%. Today, I think they're trading probably down. And the reason is everybody said, well, if they increase 16 million, what comes next? Are they going to get another 16 million, or is this the best we're going to see in Netflix? Netflix has always been expensive. And then they say, well, they've released all their content. Where are they going to get other content from as well? So those are the kind of questions, and that's the mindset of people at the moment, of investors at the moment. But it's a great business. You can't ignore it. And I think that having broken through, having got 16 million, it's unlikely that these 16 million are actually going to give up their give up their subscriptions. And for the first time, I believe they're actually cash positive. So yeah, Netflix looks pretty good. Do a little bit of your own homework. I've got to look at the metrics again. I've got to look at the valuations, but these are good companies, and why let them down? Why ignore them?
And David, luxury goods, just a few comments around China being back online, luxury goods in this environment. Have you?
I always just buy luxury. It's just buy luxury. I can never understand the mentality of people who buy luxury goods. I keep saying it. Buy the shares, not the goods, etc. So if I had the choice, I buy LVMH shares. I've had them. They've been an incredible investment for all of us. I think whether you look at Kering, which is Gucci as well, they've all done very, very well. L'Oreal, which is not really luxury, but it addresses the same market. Estee Lauder and that. When you see what people are using, what young people are using, what they're buying, what they're shopping for, that buying will come back, and I think that's going to come back fast. Probably better than other areas of the consumer market. Even my Ferrari is doing incredibly well. I can't understand why, but why people are buying Ferrari in this kind of mood, but they are. And I think the fact that they lower in production just means that they can probably charge a lot more for their Ferraris, because rich people want Ferraris, and if that's the mindset of the people who've got money, well, good luck. I'm going to buy their stupidity.
Thanks, David. And then quite a few questions coming through on the property and REIT market. Not any specifically around local or offshore, but from the way the questions were structured, I think quite a few questions around local REITs.
Yeah, look, it's not my area of coverage, but I'm very careful of them. I think retail is under a lot of pressure, and I think they're going to be under pressure a lot longer because I think just if you think about what's happening in industry today, in shopping centers today, as companies close and they're going to be small businesses under pressure, as Edgar's come under pressure, so you're going to want lower rent, and I think we're going into a period of lower rentals and more vacancies and that. So it's going to be harder for these businesses to swing around. I am not directing this at management. I think management have always run their businesses very well, but this is an economic issue, and that which is going to hang on them for a long time. I take the same attitude towards banks. Our banks are very, very well run, but they're going to be under pressure. They're going to be under pressure to make profits, to make top line and that. So you don't have to, we don't have to look for those businesses now. They appear cheap, but I think they're cheap for a reason. You can sit it out. You can sit it out 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. You don't have to make that decision now.
Thanks, David. I think there were more questions around the oil price, Sasol, and some of the international oil companies than any other question that we received today. I know you did cover it during your talk, but maybe just reiterate a view on Sasol as a company at the moment, and maybe the other companies in terms of what's happening in this oil market.
I wish I knew. I think Sasol must be under pressure. With Brent now 15, I know the rand is helping them. With commodity prices under pressure, with WTI under pressure, with chemical prices under pressure, I think they must be going through a very rough time. I know it appears cheap. It really does look cheap, and I think management's trying, but why risk your money? Why look for danger? That's what we're trying to do. You're trying to make money by looking for danger. I leave that to David Livingstone and Stanley and all the other Ryder Haggard and all those other adventurers. And, we always say, you don't need to be scalped. All those chaps who went west in the early days got scalped. Rather come in once it does start recovering. So I'd be very careful. There are too many unknowns around it. Too many unknowns about the oil price, too many unknowns about, how they're coping with this to make a decision. So my point of view is just walk away, go have a cold shower. Got a desire to buy Sasol, go have a cold shower.
Thanks, David. And then maybe just sticking to the oil price, quite a few of the attendees asking about, obviously we understand the US market and the ecosystem around oil price and Sasol, etc. But I mean, from a South African perspective and an economic perspective, we've had, big cuts in interest rates. We've had the oil price coming down, etc. Just a view on that from an economic perspective.
Look, it must help us. The only problem is that a lot of the oil prices, a lot of the petrol prices tax. But I think the element which counts has to come down quite significantly. So yes, from next week, we start to cut back on oil. OPEC has cut back 10 million barrels, and I think there are going to be more cutbacks and so on. So one would expect oil to start to stabilize after that. And you can see it in the futures prices. There's slightly better outlook there, but it's going to probably be where we now, second quarter, maybe third, fourth quarter, that you'll start to see oil picking up. So you've got a few months of difficult times ahead as this unravels, and the whole thing is around storage. I mean, and the glut that is created by the shutdown of the global economy and where to store the oil. I mean, I've never seen anything, and I don't think the systems were able to actually handle a negative number where people were actually paying you to take the oil off their hands. We've never seen anything like that. And even as we look now, there's been no major recovery. It's slightly better, but I think it's going to take time for oil to turn around again. I'd say it's a danger area. Wait, there's plenty of time. The one thing about markets is that you've always got time in your hand. You don't have to do something today, certainly in those kind of areas.
Okay, thanks, David. David, we're coming up on the hour. Any final comments before I close off?
Yeah, there were a lot of questions around interest rates. Again, this is not my area of expertise. I'm not a fixed interest man, but I think there are a couple of questions around that. And again, I take a middle road. What concerns me, sorry, I'm starting to fade. That's because the sun's coming through from the backyard. So I haven't got proper lights here. But I think what we know is that interest rates are coming down. So we've had 200 basis points reduction, probably going to get another 50 points, so 2.5% reduction in interest rates. Not 2.5% of interest rate, but you know what I'm talking about. So the short end is going to come down, and that means that a lot of instruments, a lot of short-term instruments, you're going to find your interest rates coming down. On the long end, though, 500 billion being borrowed in that, and huge borrowings, we're not out of the woods there as well. And I'm not sure how the long end is going to hold up against increased frailty of our finances as well. So we're in a difficult position. You're going to need somebody with a lot better understanding of these markets. But as a layman, I'm just staying in the middle and saying keeping my money short, and maybe looking for 3 months, 6 months, up to a year or so. As short as I can. I'm really concerned about that long end. And now we've got the end of the month where we expect the bond funds to rebalance and perhaps offload a lot of ours. And we know that Reserve Bank have been coming in and mopping up the market, and how long they can do it for, and how much they can absorb. Again, it's one of these issues that I think we're going to have to wait for. And you've got time. We're in the middle of a typhoon. You don't have to take action. You don't have to feel compelled to do anything special or anything dangerous.
Thank you very much, David. I think that's probably all we have time for today. So thank you for your insights. And then thank you very much to all the attendees. We had well over 700 people attending today. There were quite a few questions that were very specific and personal to circumstances. For example, questions around close to retirement, should I be liquidating, etc. These depend quite heavily on your personal circumstances. So we are going to do our best to attend to these questions more directly. And then also just to mention, Sasfin is a multi-boutique collection of portfolio managers that are independent. So, there may be some variances on certain of the positions across those portfolio managers in terms of some of the positions David articulated. And then please do visit our content hub on sasfin.com. All the recordings of these webinars are on there. We update it with other content on a daily basis. And then please look out for further invitations. We've had 4 webinars so far during the lockdown. We have a few more planned, so look out for those, and enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you for joining us. Thank you, David.
Thank you.